Okay, everyone. Welcome back to our next keynote presentation for this afternoon. We're pleased to welcome Kaspersky Lab to SNW Europe and Powering the Cloud events. It's their first time with us, and they've invested as a gold sponsor, and we're very pleased to have them with us here this week. We have a change of speaker. This is Llewdlyn. Joe's had to step in because our original speaker has been a victim of the storms in North America. I think he couldn't get out to get here in time. So, but I'm sure that Joe will be a fine replacement. He's a Welshman. I'm English. So we're almost together British. We need a Scotsman and we're fine. So I'll leave you in the hands of Joe for the next 35 minutes.
Great, thank you. Yes, Peter unfortunately is stuck in a different kind of cloud, one that you wouldn't want to get in front of. I promised myself I wouldn't use that joke, but it's happened. So a very good afternoon to you all. It's always interesting in places like this where they don't give you seats outside as to whether people have come in to see somebody or whether it's just to sit down. But I think everybody's paying attention, which is great. There's no palm tops out, which is good. So today's presentation is all about the move, really, from physical to virtual. And it's a bit of a long title, but it does make sense, or I hope it translates anyway. And these are Peter's slides as well, so I've tried to get used to them. So if I do slip up, I apologise, but it's all good. So I'm going to start off with giving you a bit of a picture as to what's been going on in the malware world, the malware landscape, as they call it. This is the Kaspersky view, of course, it would be. But more importantly, as you can see there, the jump in the rate of malware, as it were. 125,000 new components found every single day, new samples found every day. Now, of course, what the point of my presentation is going to be, that even if you move away from having an endpoint and move it to the cloud, all of these risks are very valid. And I'm going to go through the next few minutes as to why that is and answer any questions you have at the end as well. So, these are our four main actors in this play, really. This hasn't changed too much, really, the last of which is getting more interesting. The first one, of course, is cyber criminals. These are people, as we all know, that try and make money from us all. It could be stealing bank account details, it could be accessing PayPal accounts, or just general mischief, really. You've got your hacktivists who obviously are going out there, like your Anonymous, and making a public scene of things for a cause or for good or bad, who knows. But either way, they have a cause and they are hacking and making their cause well known. We also have the APT-style attacks. These are the kind of attacks that are very much targeted. The Advanced Persistent Threats, APT, for those of you who don't know that. And advanced persistent threats are very simple in their nature, and I'll talk about those later on because they are, by all means, one of the most powerful threats that are out there at the moment. You also have the other one that Eugene talks about himself a lot. I'm sure some of you have seen some of Eugene's talks, and they very much talk about this, the cyber espionage and the nation-state cyber espionage that goes on. It's quite an interesting subject. I don't want to cover it today because that's his specialty and it takes a long time to go through, but it's a very interesting subject matter and will become more interesting as time goes on, I'm sure. So, what we're looking at here, well, first of all, we're talking about attacks. Now, first of all, the kind that attack people via the web. As you can see here, you've all been on the web. Some of you may have got this fake malware. Who's had that before? Well, yeah, they've gone to a website and they've pressed the button thinking they were downloading a security component. Of course, that's all very well and good. But what is interesting is Java has taken over the target. And the interesting thing about Java, for those of you who don't know, is it's pretty much on every device that's out there. It's on mobiles, it's in cars, it's everywhere. So Java, again, is one of those platforms that viruses can run on pretty much in any environment it wants. It can vary in degrees as to what it does, but it's still a platform on which a virus can run. And the way Java is all over the world, and in fact one of the first things you would have done when you got your new computer was install Java and Flash and things like that. It's a very, very powerful target for people. The other side of things as well is the maturity of cybercrime. This is no longer a 10-year-old in his, or 30-year-old rather, in his mother's basement with a laptop, just trying to make a few pounds by stealing his friends' identities. This is now very much a criminal act, criminal organisations, and people passing information between each other and distancing themselves, removing the paper trail. It's like a digital paper trail. And they have these processes and procedures in place. It's very much a proper criminal organisation that's going on here, very well organised organisation, if that makes sense. The other more important part for today, really, is the VMware aspect of this, or virtual machine side of things. A lot of the viruses we're now seeing are virtual machine aware. Now, what I mean by this is that they will work out if they're running on a virtual machine. Now, the objective of that could be a number of things. First of all, when you have a piece of malware and you're trying to examine it, as a lot of people do, the first thing a researcher will try is to run it in a virtual machine to see what it does. And in some viral cases, the virus will detect it's running in a virtual machine and stop doing the nasty things it should. So again, that's one side of it where we're trying to see the behavior of a virus. The other side of it is very simple as well. Imagine there are targeted attacks on virtual platforms. Again, they're becoming more valuable. We're moving more of our assets. A lot of small companies even are moving their mail servers and things to the cloud and to virtual platforms. So for a virus to jump on and work out whether it's running on a virtual platform or not, and where it can go and what it can do, is quite appealing. So VM-aware viruses are already out there. They already exist, and they're already starting to do harm. One of the other sides of things as well, on the trust element, is we've started to see this kind of thing too, the certificate authorities. Who knows this story? The certificates being obtained somehow and used, so signed certificates that would normally be used for hardware that your computer will trust. Those are being used to install software you don't trust. Because, again, it can get through all the security nets, it looks trustworthy, and, again, very important. What is interesting, however, is we're starting to see more of these, but they are very professional in their nature as well. I don't want to spend too much time on these, because you can all Google and look at our threat post site and find out more about them. It's an amazing story behind a lot of these kind of attacks, where they have these certificates and they are using them. It's very, very interesting. So with regard to threats on virtual platforms, I've not picked any random ones out here. We can see, for example, we've seen security advisories, again, around virtual platforms. But more importantly, what these are all about, and one of the things we've seen as well, Ryan Narone is one of our guys who talks about this on our site, is all about the escalation side of things, the guest to host. So in other words, if I place my operating system in a virtual environment, can it jump out of that virtual environment and into the host platform? Whatever platform you might be running, I'm trying to be neutral on virtual platform. It could be anything. But there are instances, and there's a great white paper I'll refer to later on, where it is quite simple to jump out of the virtual operating system, the shell that you've created, and into the host itself. So again, that's another concern that we currently have. There's also the traditional stuff, as you'd expect. You can see all the way back here to 2011, there have been instances where virtual machines are found to either have holes or those holes have been targeted. Okay, this is not across one platform, it's across all of them. So again, these are being targeted, they do have holes, and over time, of course, we'll see much more of these come up as those holes are found proactively and also by the people that you never want to find those holes as well. They're the people you do not want to have these vulnerabilities on. This is the white paper I was referring to earlier. I'd write it down if you're interested in this sort of thing. It explains about how the virtual machine, again, it could be just a Windows machine or whatever, can jump out of itself using drivers that allow it to talk to the host. So, again, I'm not going to go into too much depth here because it's a very, very good bit of research. But ultimately, it means that even if you think you're safe with all of your little virtual machines, there is the possibility that one of those machines could run a piece of code and jump out of itself as well. Now, when it comes to virtual desktops, that becomes a more interesting factor because now your users are clicking on things and doing things. It's not just an administrator running an Exchange server or a SharePoint server. People are now moving their desktops up to the cloud, into the virtual environment. Who here runs all their desktops as VDIs or thin clients in a virtual system? Anybody? Not at all. All right, maybe in future. But that's a big risk as well. What I mean by this is the advanced persistent threats. These are the ones that are pointed towards users. Now, all of you here have received some kind of malware as a Word document or a PDF file, yeah? And how many people in this room have known people click on that and run it? Nobody's going to admit to that. Nobody. Okay, one. But not a lot of people admit to doing that. But again, it's so persistent, and it changes all the time. One day you get a DHL message. The next day it could be something to do with the tax office. Again, it's all social engineering, but these are persistent threats that keep coming at you. But more importantly, of course, they look legitimate. And if they're targeted towards users, and the users are sat on your platform, they're sat on your virtual environment, there's a possibility they could be clicking on something that opens up one of those escalation kind of attacks that we've seen, the client to host. Just so to explain the level of attackers that we get as well, and this is quite important too. So these are the way we class them in ourselves. So first of all, the top tier. For example, these are the guys that are finding these holes proactively. They don't need help from anybody else. They're finding them, and then they're exploiting them. They don't tell anybody. They don't announce to the world they found a massive gaping hole in a piece of software. They just go and exploit it and probably sell that exploit onto somebody else as well. We've then got the second tier, which is where they reuse the code and change it around, but they change the way it actually infects, or they change part of the code so radically it looks different, but it's effectively the same thing. With the third tier, this is where the virus is getting old. It keeps going round and round. Somebody's got a copy of it, they've modified it. It's now becoming just a normal piece of code we're going to see every day, and it's going to be very easy to detect. And the fourth tier, of course, is the very, very old stuff that you would never, ever expect to run on a machine because it's just so obvious. So you're ranging the top there, top tier, from the biggest threats that are very low, very unseen, they're stealthy, all the way down to the ones that are blindingly obvious. But don't forget, these are still used. If you look at email stats, you see a lot of the MyDoom or Claire's or SoBig. Those viruses were out 10 years ago, and they're still going round and round because somebody somewhere is stupid enough to click on the email and open it up, or restore a machine from 1999. Who knows what they're doing? But if you look at the stats, it's really weird because you see these old viruses coming up, and you wonder who on earth has brought them from the dead. It's very strange. Either way. This is an example of one of them. So the RSA attack was a very simple one. Again, this is stuff that you can also research offline as well. But the social engineering aspect is very simple. By planting the threat inside the Excel file, of course, they were able to get into a system just by wording the mail in a socially engineered way. And again, don't forget, it doesn't matter what this threat is, and again, this is the Duku virus. It doesn't matter what the threat is. If your user is getting this kind of stuff to their desktop and it's in a VDI environment or a virtual environment, whatever it is, this is still a threat no matter what. Who knows what's inside there? It could be absolutely anything. So again, protecting those platforms and the virtual environments is becoming really, really critical. It's not just moving it and saving money. It's also bearing in mind that security has to be as good as it would be on a server or a desktop that's physically next to you as well. So some of the security scenarios that are VMware specific or virtual machine specific. First of all, we can see privilege escalation, escape to host. And that's all about running on the machine, jumping out and starting to do things on a level that it wasn't designed to do. Again, that could be through a graphics driver, it could be anything at all. And again, that white paper is quite interesting in the detail it goes into. Second, of course, is traffic sniffing. So again, there's some new technologies that providers are coming out with, so security vendors can link into the back end of their systems. So new APIs, so they can start to do intrusion detection and things like that on virtual platforms. Again, just because they're on a virtual platform and they're sat next to each other, all that hardware that you spent money on to look for internal intrusion is wiped out, because that data no longer leaves the box. It no longer leaves those virtual pockets, as it were. Just skipping on to the more important part here, we're looking at most of the things being about the advanced persistent threat. So a lot of the innovations that we're seeing across all of the virtual sphere is very much about these persistent threats, how to stop them. And again, this is more about user behavior than it is actually anything else. You know, how do we stop code running on a machine, a virtual machine, that potentially will damage the entire infrastructure? So again, very important. And remember, a user can trigger that whole process. Just another interesting one here, one about the crisis Trojan. This is actually one of the first ones we saw sneaking onto VMware. And as you can see here, we've actually got some it's quite interesting because it also spreads to Windows mobile devices. So this proves again that it doesn't matter where your platform goes, it can also spread in a crazy way. So who'd have thought that that would happen and it would spread to Windows mobiles? Although there have been viruses in the past, of course, that infect your mobile and then save a piece of malware to your mobile phone. So when you plug it in, it turns into Windows malware that then spreads around your network. So we've seen that before, but this is kind of a very different take. So, on the conclusion side of things, what's important to remember, and this is what people do forget, is that there isn't a significant difference between the virtual world and the real world. If the box is in front of me, it needs protection. If the box is moved to the cloud or a virtual environment, it still needs protection. And people are forgetting that sometimes when they go and jump from the real world into the virtual world. On top of that as well, non-targeted attacks through obscurity, that's important as well, you know, hiding things from plain sight. Again, second worst is no longer a valid tactic. I don't need to kind of explain what that means, but it's pretty obvious. And finally, of course, all those signs point towards VM-specific attacks. The things we're seeing at the moment are all very, very VM-specific. Or again, what we're seeing in the business world as well. Even small companies are now adopting a virtual strategy to lower costs, to move things into a much more accessible place. And therefore, of course, that is undoubtedly going to be the next frontier. It's going to be where everything is pointed towards, where every virus malware writer is trying to go for. It's where the bandwidth will be, it's where the information will be, and more importantly, it's where the money will be to them as well. Okay? Crikey, that was that was Peter's slides. What can I say? Are there any questions at all on that? Cool. It's not designed to be a lecture in security for virtual networks. It's a very brief overview as to the way we see things. So apologies it was brief, but hopefully it was useful. Great, thank you.